Hello, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people. It's time for part number 2 of the... Oh, shit. Two, come on. Show me, camera. There we go. Hey, guys, listen. It's very important that you know this is part 2 of daily number 402, where we learn to be a better gamer. The real daily 402, not the botched train wreck that's uploaded as the most epic fail of all time to my YouTube. Ding! We just got done talking about Thorzain's early game, and it ends up being a very nice little timing. We're fairly safe, even though we cut corners like building no bunkers. We get super fast medevacs with drop that outright kills a lot of stuff for us, and that allows us to step more comfortably into the mid-game. And of course we're going to talk about the mid-game in a second, but I would love to also talk about Thorzain's early game, because Thorzain does a very clever Zergling Infestor early game. Let's go ahead and go to his camera. But I wanted to just tell you in advance, Stephano is going to be going Zergling Infestor. Straight up, that's his style. He does it very, very, very well, and it's quite brilliant the way that he adjusts himself around for it. But the important thing to note is that there's no super obvious key timing that you can comfortably land in. What would be the best example of that? How would we put that? Okay, so there's some early expand openings for Terran where you get siege tanks with siege mode, and they finished right in time for you to be able to hold off this scary roach push. Or there are builds where you finish Colossus range just in time to deal with a scary Zerg attack, where there's a big unit like a siege tank or a Colossus that's helping you. Most commonly, the big unit for Zerg in the early game is the Baneling. Oh yeah, my Baneling's finished just in time to crush that Marine force. Stephano is going to be going Zergling Infestor. He's not... You can't get Infestors quickly enough to stop a lot of those big pushes. So obviously the question is, when do we start building Zerglings? The Zerglings are going to be the only tool we can use to defend them, because I already told you we're only making Zerglings and Infestors. So we want to talk about that. When does Stephano suddenly start building a lot of Zerglings based upon what he sees? So it's going to involve a little bit of reading, because there's a fairly big range, but already right off the bat, we see that Stephano gets himself quite an early gas on 17. Tends to be the most typical. And he's in close positions, so right now he's running the risk of 2-3 racks in base plays, causing him a little bit of trouble. He sees this one Marine here doing a little poke, but still note that he builds only 2 Zerglings, gets the 2 Queens immediately, and of course favors getting this Zergling speed out. And after all of that, then he goes and he starts making them Overlords. There's 1 Overlord. There's 2 Overlords. He's actually at 28 of 28 food before he does any of that stuff. And here is an extremely interesting moment. Bam! Builds another hatchery at his 3rd. Based upon what? Well, this Overlord just comfortably saw that there was a command center building right here. I think that's pretty simple. Often, Stephano, if he doesn't see that, he'll build this hatch here. And he'll build it a little bit later. He'll start making some drones first here and here. Maybe make a spine crawler, but a pretty damn early 3rd hatch. So he continues to poke up here. He sees that there's this fun, wubbulous, lovely reactor factory play. And this is one of the reasons why Stephano gets this Zergling speed up so early. It makes dealing with the Hellions far easier, but still note Stephano is not building a lot of Zerglings right now. That's a pretty key thing to note, and I think, again, one of the problems that's so easy to run into. You say you're going to go Zergling Infestor. You're not going to build Roaches to deal with the Hellions. You're not going to build Banelings to deal with the Hellions. When you see Hellions start to build, you don't need Zerglings right away. You just want to get this spine crawler started right away and try to rack up as many drones as possible. What if 2 Hellions started running towards your base at this very moment? What if they started to come down this way? There would be 2 of them. We would easily just sort of nibble away with the Queen, build some Zerglings as needed, but for right now we need to build a lot of drones. A sort of trademark move that Stephano does when he does this early third against both Protoss and Terran. He delays the third queen in favor of doing more interesting things with gas. So we're already seeing him start to throw units back into gas, so that way he can build himself an evolution chamber. And this is where all of a sudden Stephano Zerg style logic becomes a little bit unnatural for a lot of players. At this very moment, if you were to, for instance, go for, let's say you were a Mutaling player, and you see what Stephano does, and you say, hey, I want to take my third early too. So you take it. I talked a little bit about this on State of the Game. Your instinct, when you're stuck on 2 bases, is to say, well, I'll just do what I can with 2 bases. I'll get my layer up, Baneling Nest for defense, start getting upgrades, all reasonable, and then I'll get the Mutalisks out and go. But when you have this opportunity to take a third, it's easy to go, let me take my third, and then I'll just do the same thing as before. Get the Mutalisks up, get the Banelings up, start getting my upgrades, but I'll have this wicked good economy. Mutalisks, in a lot of circumstances, are good because you get them quickly. You get them up to where Terran is on the defensive. And what Stephano does that's so clever is he says, well, if I'm taking this third, I actually don't have that much time to get up a layer with a spire, as we'll see in just a moment. I'm going to have to rely more on Zerglings. So rather than just lightly rely on Zerglings, rather than just say, I want to get those Mutalisks up, so let me try to get a little more Zerglings than normal. No, he says, if Zerglings what I have to build to stay alive, then yeah, let me devote gas to Zergling upgrades instead of to a layer. And Stephano paces himself with his geysers. Around 44 food, he's building his next geyser. There's the +1 ground carapace already going down. And what he's going to do is get Geyser 2 up, and then 3 and 4 up, and as he gets more gas, then he'll slowly begin getting more upgrades, and slowly begin getting the hive. And only as he has Hellions at his front door is he actually beginning to make Zerglings. He already has 37 drones up, and I think that this is one of the big strengths of his playstyle already. Look at how few freaking Hellions he's building, and this is essentially all he's seen. He did get the chance to poke in here and see that there was a barracks on here. I want to caution you away from thinking you need to see the starport. The big thing is that the barracks is here. The big thing is that he's not building that many Hellions anymore. And one thing that I intentionally skipped over is the fact that we see Stephano looking for that. See this Zergling right here? It's pretty important to have some ability to get a Zergling by like this, just to get an easy peasy read. Boom! Great! He has a barracks there. He's getting a reactor. No more huge threat from Hellions. We saw Stephano start to build drones, and we saw him continue to build drones. Easy. If for some reason our opponent was building a lot more Hellions, we would appropriately make more Zerglings. And I think most appropriately of all, be a little bit more comfortable with delaying some sort of, how would I say that? I think that you can delay the third quite a good bit. If he wants to try to contain you, you can just kind of let him contain. I think it can be very dangerous to see like 6, 8, 10 Hellions and then to go, oh my god, time to build a huge number of Zerglings to try to overrun it and take it down. Just get Infestors up and Fungal Growth it and crush it. If he's building just 4 Hellions, I think you're in good shape. And it's okay to send a Zergling or 2 Zerglings out there. Have patience. Focus more on drones is the big theme. Focus more on drones. Not too much has been done with this expansion. A single spine crawler goes down, but look at how Stephano paces himself with the gas. This is one of the I think the real trademarks of what makes Stephano so good. Boom! When do I get this melee upgrade? When I have the gas to. When do I get my layer? When I have the gas to. My entire build is structured around when I get the geysers. And notice there's always a hefty bit of money left over and always nothing left on gas. So, at this point in time, Stephano is still building himself an incredible amount of drones. an absolutely insane amount of drones. And here comes another hatchery coming up with not that much knowledge of what's going on. And in terms of opening, I think that Stephano, may have gotten himself a little bit too over. God, what is my replay doing? My replay's gone nuts. Well, whatever. I'll just zoom back to the place where we were before. I think he might be going a little bit too skimpy on the Zergling count. I think that as this layer's coming up, I think probably right around 60 food, building a round of Zerglings, or at the very least doing a small prod here, is going to be pretty important. This is pretty decently useful information, but the one thing that is really nice about this Stephano style, this mass Zergling style, your Zerglings are in fact so good that they can solve tons of problems for you. So now what I want to do is I want to come to the mid-game portion of what I want to say. So we're going to be going through this at least somewhat quickly because, again, we're 11 minutes into the daily and I want to hit the end game portions. This is a moment where I think it's very easy for mistakes to begin happening. So as we come back here, we see that there is this drop. It's very easy to become over-eager and over-aggressive in terms of defending this. What I like about what Stephano does is he's going to pull way back. All he wants to do is minimize the amount of stuff that gets shot at. He may very well lose this layer. That's fine. He carefully gets into position. He's shooting at these medevacs and really carefully moving himself around. Really ultra carefully. And then he engages at one of the later possible times when he could have engaged. I still think he should have been even a little bit more patient than that. And you'll see Stephano in so many games is very careful about arranging, moving here, moving here, moving here, and then hitting it from all sides. I want you to think of the following two situations. If you send a limbo line of units towards a force, you will a lot of times lose everything and then have nothing to defend that drop with, and you'll lose the game right there. You can reposition yourself, get in a good spot, maybe lose a little bit of stuff, and then you can crush it and still be in the game. In both circumstances, you're not in good shape. You were unprepared for the drop. But in this circumstance, you had an outright loss. In this circumstance, you're still in the game and you're still fighting. Yeah, we like that. We like that a lot. So just as a general control tip, let yourself lose an extractor. Let yourself lose maybe a layer. Let it happen. And obviously, what is Stephano building at this point? Well, he's building Zerglings. Easy, right? In fact, easiest thing in the known universe. Stephano will kill off this one guy, barely. And you're already seeing why this little opening from Thorzain is pretty damn good. It came fast. I mean, sure, we took this third, but it's not like we were investing huge amounts of money to protect it and keep it alive. It's not like we were in some sort of tragic situation where we had all the focus down here and the drop took us by surprise. Nope, just a very well-timed drop from Thorzain that exploits how Zergs tend to power. Excuse me. And of course, most important thing to note, if you were totally wrong about what Zerg was doing, and he has tons of units, and can easily crush the drop, you go home. You can fly. What is he really going to do? Is he going to throw his stupid queen spikes at your freaking medevac while it's running away? I bet. He really honestly can't have a spire up. Really, I mean, it's hitting before 10 minutes. Those various fart noises should provide ample conclusion for that statement. Okay, now, here's a point in time where I think a lot of players from both sides will be a little confused. I'm going to do less pausing right now. From the Terran point of view, we've lost a huge amount of forces. We didn't win the game. We did damage, but we lost a lot of stuff. It's very easy as a Terran player to feel somewhat lost. Don't you worry at all. Just delay building that frickin' tank. Just delay it. Get upgrades, get Marines and medevacs, and try to secure a third. That's what I want you to think about. 5 barracks before he builds this command center. 5 barracks. Really getting his macro going very, very well. Now, on the Zerg point of things, I think this is where some of the biggest missteps occur from the Zerg side as well. Zergs are going to want to over-perceive how big their opponent's army is. If you look in the unit tab, 12 Marines, and that's basically it. Anytime you kill off a huge force, when you're doing the Stephano style, I love that he's just going Infestor Drone, basically. An Infestor Drone mixture with plenty of creep adding to boot. And of course the good old Pathogen Glands upgrade. Just Infestor Drone until he can get himself up. Oh, look, investing in those 2/2 upgrades. The upgrades are some of the most important things ever. At this point, Stephano just sees an army moving out and he's going to respond naturally, just building some Zerglings. Infestor Drone until all of a sudden you start really seeing some stuff move out, and great. And notice I say Infestor Drone and then be patient because we had this huge hit and because we killed off a lot of stuff. We're going to be building Zerglings a lot earlier. And I won't be talking too much about those other circumstances today, but definitely watch the Shoutcraft Invitational 4 finals. You'll see Stephano do all sorts of good stuff with this. It's wonderful. The one little hidden sudden element that's so crucial is this Speed Overlord upgrade. That Speed Overlord upgrade, I think, is the big, huge key. Now, from a Terran point of view, finally getting tanks, but using the Marine medevac numbers in small troops to just get a little bit nuts. Stephano spreading his creep, but not like some sort of super mad creep spreading insane nutcase. Just some, spreading it enough. Joining your bases, far more important than spreading towards his base. Zerglings and Infestors are fast anyways and don't need the creep desperately to function well. But for defending your base, you do need that creep up. So, what we're seeing Stephano do is he's going Infestor, Drone, pretty normal, and then peppering in these spurts of Zerglings. I'd probably actually more so say that he's building mainly Zerglings and peppering in the drones. But the important thing that I think Stephano is doing is that he is expanding rapidly. He lost his frickin' main, rebuilt, no problem. Took a fourth, no problem. We're at 14 minutes and 30 seconds, and Stephano has lost his main, and yet he's retaking this hatchery. Big benefit to Zergling Infestor. Very cheap. You can just churn out the bases, and you should. Really good. As the Terran player, as Thorzain, he only has 2 tanks. He's the first 2 tanks of his whole game. And he is going to outright just take the gold. Brilliant. How is he able to take the gold? Because he was doing aggressive drop play here, because he's doing aggressive drop play here, and now he can walk his tanks into position. You don't have to take a gold. I wouldn't recommend doing it on Antigua, but cool. Thorzain, the important thing is that the Marines allow him to get into a good position on a generic map and establish control of an expansion. Just briefly, close your eyes and envision yourself on Antigua Shipyard as Terran. You're on 2 bases. Envision that, and imagine you being unable to walk down your ramp and take that really easy to defend third. That's kind of annoying when you just can't even get to your third. Thorzain's opening would allow you to get to that third. What's another map? On Shattered Temple. That gold expansion. When do you have time to be able to set up siege tanks right at that gold? Easy, no problem. Walk right out there after you've done this aggressive opening. And then you put the siege tanks into position. Appropriately so. Thorzain just builds a second factory as he's getting that expo up. And honestly, Thorzain is not going to do that much brilliant, crazy stuff from now on. He's just going to do normal brilliant stuff. Get a lot of upgrades. Get a lot of upgrades. Build a lot of Marines and tanks. Build a lot of Marines and tanks. Cool. Now, on Stephano's end, he's letting his gas pace himself. Wants to get these 2/2 upgrades. As he has gas, he gets a hive. And he's churning out a lot of Zerglings. In terms of the pushing with this Zergling Infestor style, you're going to see Stephano throw out a couple of beach balls like this. These allow him to advance. These are what absorb the tank shots. These Zerglings are a little bit too far ahead, but they're here to pick off these things. But just watch how he walks himself forward with the Infestors. He's not just going T and spamming. Throwing down those beach balls at the start, throwing down just a couple like this, absorbs siege tank hits very, very well. And we see that Stephano is doing a decent job of advancing, but mainly is doing a decent job of establishing control of this fourth. Do tons of pushes like this. Lots of pushes like this. Tease the edge of his base with Zerglings and Infestors. You can. You always have the ability to do that, because your Zerglings are fast and can run away, and if he tries to run after your Infestors, you fungal growth him, and you isolate those clumps that are chasing you down. If you have your entire Ling Infestor army being aggressive at the front of his base, he will have to cluster his units more often than not. Now here's something that really surprises, I think, a lot of people. Where the hell is it? Where's the Ultralisk Cavern? Where's the Ultralisk Cavern? Bam! Ultralisk. Very often people will see the Ultralisk and say, this unit sucks. What a terrible unit. How are we doing on time? Okay, we're going to run a little bit over. That's fine. A lot of people will say, the Ultralisk is such a bad unit. Oh, it's so not good. I will preface all of this by saying there's actually a glitch that I believe is being repaired right now, where if an Ultralisk cleaves, does its whack, does its little... You know what I'm talking about? When it hits... if, for instance, a Marauder shot and then ran, and then the Ultralisk swiped and missed it a little bit, the Marauder takes no damage, and because the target didn't take damage, there's no cleave damage that happens on the backside. So in other words, it's possible to take 0 damage from Ultralisks. But this is the reason why, with Stephano's style, Ultralisks are, I think, a vastly superior choice to going for Mutalisks. Or not Mutalisks, Broodlords, or something like that. First of all, we already have the upgrades. We also have a highly mobile, highly aggressive army. This really ramps up the aggression a lot faster. If you were to go for Broodlords, you would suddenly lose your momentum. You'd be getting really aggressive, and then you'd build your Spire, and then you'd start the Greater Spire, and then you get the Corruptors out, and you get the Broodlords out, and if there's one unit that cannot get where it needs to be in a hurry, it's a Broodlord. Ultralisks are really, really fast, and we're going to see Stephano use that nice and aggressively, and because we've established all these expansions, we have plenty of geysers to be able to get ourselves a hefty amount of Ultralisks. Nice mobile army. Can't be bad. And notice that Stephano just takes some Zerglings and just says, go, follow him, follow him. Again, I want to note that in terms of Thorzain's decision-making, nothing noteworthy has really happened for quite some time. He's taking expansions, that's great. Notice that he is setting a rally point to here, but he's pushing down along this expansion. This helps. This expansion is completely and totally ultra super safe. If he pushed along this lane, this backdoor expansion would not be so safe to counterattack from the backside. But Thorzain has a nice little cup here. And I think that this is a smart decision because he's up against Zergling Infestor. If he was up against Mutalisks, I think that pushing down the center lane is probably going to be a little bit more important because it's much easier to zone Mutalisks than it is to get any control over Zerglings, because even 12 Zerglings can break off at any point in time. And look at how unusual it is to see the Zerg ahead of the Terran in upgrades. So we get to see some good old true strength of our Zergling Infestor force. You don't really need to be that high. And be aware of the early beach ball volleys. Be aware that there's not that many drones at these bases. It's a pretty low drone count overall at these bases, but they all have geysers. Stephano being really Thorzain being really careful with these spreads. You know, like you do. Even though there's no Banelings in this force, you can almost treat Fungals like Banelings because they hurt, in my eyes, way freaking worse. And look at that, 7 Ultralisks popping out right now. Now, I have a question for you that I think is an important one that Stephano's going to answer for himself. How do you put pressure back on the Terran player in this game? Obviously, we don't see this directly, but we can kind of imagine our player taking that base. Drop, again, drop. Even though drop might not be an overall best decision ever, It's not about thinking of it in overall senses. It's about thinking of it in specific senses. If you're being really aggressive with Zerglings and Infestors, transitioning to Ultralisks, way better than Broodlords, and then getting Ventral Sacks, way, way useful for breaking an opponent with a super mobile force. I'm trying to find the P button and hit play, but I keep whiffing. There we go. I do like that Stephano is rallying everything to the front lines. Sometimes you have to be careful with this against Zergling Mutalisk, but your opponent has a ground-based army, so of course there's really kind of a lot of difficulty with trying to swing Ultras around to the backside. Notice that there is an emphasis on beach balls. By the way, I call Infested Terrans beach balls. Cool. There's a huge emphasis on beach balls rather than on fungal growths. And it's so easy to look at this situation and say, oh god, Broodlords would be so much better in this sort of situation. But watch what happens as Stephano suddenly begins to crack this defense. He suddenly begins to break through it just by having incredible macro and rallying everything through. And now he can really just hop into high gear and boom, this expansion is suddenly hugely threatened. Thorzain, I think appropriately, is going to have to pull everything back. And I think that, inappropriately, this is the latest adrenal gland of all time, and that it hurts so much. Grr. So I want you to note that up until this point in time, it's been pretty much a big mid-game push from Thorzain and his control versus a big mid to late-game army from Stephano and his control. But again, I don't want you to think of this sort of situation as, oh, okay, I won direct battles, I guess that means I'm in good shape. We always want to ask, in our mid-game, the most important question is, where do I want to expand next, and how do I put pressure on my opponent? And they're pretty interrelated. For instance, let's look at Thorzain's point of view, because we've been basically, you know, treating Thorzain with a little bit of disrespect, saying nothing too noteworthy at this point in time. He's essentially just macroing it up, building Marines, tanks, and medevacs. The most noteworthy thing of all is that anytime he sees Hive Tech, Ghost Academy, Barracks with Tech Labs add-ons. And I think until you get really good, it's okay to think of it like that. There's some specific timings where around when you're getting your 4th, it's a good time to begin getting the Ghost Academy and the Tech Lab add-ons. Should probably scan around 1730 is a good time to scan to see if his Hive's done yet, and then get the Ghost Academy. But you know what? If you see Hive Tech unit, get Ghost. Boom. Easy peasy. But I'm going to ask you now, where should Thorzain expand, and how should Thorzain apply pressure? It is an okay answer to say, nowhere. He shouldn't expand right now. Absolutely not. And if that's the case, a big bad direct push seems like a good decision. Pushing right down this lane. Or hell, pushing right back down this lane while doing a drop over here. But if we do expand, let's say we expand right here where these Marines are. Look at the minimap. If I expand here, how does a push look on the minimap? Look how far this mouse cursor is away from that. The attack pattern in relation to your expanding, really important. Were I to expand here, I probably would want to have some sort of either offense here or defense. But since my main army just died and I'm running a little bit low on units, I'm probably going to want to set up a defense here, which means that almost immediately I'll need to send up a defense here, which means almost immediately it seems most reasonable for me to take a 6th here. Are you starting to see how just asking, how do I expand, how do I put pressure on, that makes sense? Well, it doesn't really seem like we're putting that much pressure on if we take those expands. We should probably begin doing some sort of dropping here, or if we have this base, or if we have this defense here, and if we have this defense here, well, maybe I should just take this watchtower like that and like this, and just shut off his gold. Yeah, actually, that's probably what I would want to do in this particular circumstance. It's pretty damn hard in the middle of a game to process all that. To be able to look and say, okay, where do I want to attack? When do I want to expand? How do I want to expand? Is it time not to attack? Should I be attacking now? Review a lot in your own replays, and in fact, here, we can just do this real slice fast. Should he expand and attack? Should he hold back? I would probably be a little more inclined to do another push once I got 2 ghosts out. Or I'd be inclined, well, since I'm building these 2 command centers, to go expand, planetary, planetary. It's probably what I would want to do. Stephano, let's ask the same question. How do I, excuse me, how do I put pressure back on? I think ventral sacks, great way to put pressure on. I can still walk Zerglings up along here, kill stuff up here, do some damage here. If my opponent is pushing on the left side, I can still sort of swing along the right side. I want to sneak in the main here. Why do I want to do drops in the main? Because I want to cut off his expansions on the left. And why would I want to do drops specifically with this style? Because I have a mobile force. This, I think, very clearly is going to be my 6th. I'm going to have a hard time taking this base. Easy review. Oh, look, it looks like Thorzain is at least hinting that he wants to do some drops. Oh, look at that Viking. Remember that Viking we made earlier? Love that choice. Love it. Love that choice. Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, makes perfect, total, absolute sense that Stephano would take this hatchery. Really easy. We have plenty of mobile forces to go down here. Any other expansions on the map that we want to take? Not particularly. Let's see, is there anything too noteworthy happening right here? Yeah, see, this is a slightly awkward moment in gameplay where we're seeing Burrow go down. We see Stephano's defended, but there's been not as many attempts to poke and prod as we'd like. Zerg actually is the most prod-friendly race because they just have such stupidly fast units. And we're seeing Thorzain. Yeah, look, he's expanding here. And look at the tanks starting to extend reach on these 2 sides. Oh, look. If he's not doing a direct attack, if he's expanding, look at that. Look at these drops that are springing up all over the place. See, once you start hitting 20 to 25 minutes, it stops being about these predetermined decisions, and it's more about judgment. Your judgment is always based around where you expand. Beautiful drop play right here. Why is it beautiful? Well, obviously it's going to maybe kill some stuff. Obviously we have a drop here, and that helps. But most kick-assedly of all, boom! Expansion. Had time to get up into a planetary fortress. Do not care if both these drops do very little damage. We start to see these ventral sacks popping up. And this is something that I think is so beautiful. This is like the sexiest thing. Oh god, it totally arouses me, and I love it. The fact that Stephano is getting these ventral sacks up, because it's a time like this when people are most often going to accuse the Ultralisk of being the ugliest unit in the game, because, well, what do we do now? We can't kill this with Ultralisks, we can't kill that with Ultralisks. Anytime you describe a unit as mobile, think of all the things that mobile units do. Counterattack, isolate small things, defend drops, perform drops, and just start asking yourself if they're all possibilities. Again, focusing on gas rather than minerals. Not a ton of guys mining gas. Ooh, yeah, look at that. The Burrow upgrade, a nice late game transition. Burrow and Ventral Sack. The exact opposite of your average everyday passive player. Spreading stuff out. I think there's not too much else to say about that. And of course, the one big thing that before we go into the next break that I want to note is that as we're getting into this stale stagnation period, which largely is motivated by this 5th base, this is really what declared this to be late game. It's time to start thinking about the ultra late game compositions, which we will have the delightful opportunity to look at after this 2 to 3 minute break. It's going to be a little bit long of a daily, but you know what? Botch the daily on Tuesday. Ugh. SOPA, daily 404 on Wednesday. You deserve another 30 minutes of content. I'll see you in a sec. I'll see you in a sec. I'll see you in about 3 minutes.